Hi, folks. First of all, really excited to be here. This is actually my first Phocuswright, so I'm thrilled to finally get to join you all here. I am Julie Farago. I am the VP of Engineering for both travel and local search, and I'm here to talk to you about Google Travel in the era of AI. Hot topic these days. So just to do this, let me start by taking us back to 2006. Back in 2006, our founder, Larry Page, really envisioned this future of search that could anticipate our needs and really understand the context of our questions and deliver personalized insights. And so that vision has guided Google Search over the last couple of decades, and we are constantly redefining what is possible with search. Over that time, search has become definitely my constant companion and many other people globally. And it really helps with questions from the mundane to the wanderlust, going from questions like, what's the weather today in Phoenix, to epic trips for my bucket list, for my travel bucket list. And because of that, Google sees more than 2 billion searches per day. So it's used for a wide variety of needs, and it's where the world turns to for answers. And what we found is that the better we get at answering questions, the more questions come. That essentially we kind of invite curiosity every time we think that we've answered questions effectively. They become even more curious, which is wonderful. And because of that, search really remains our greatest moonshot inside of Google. And when I think about this, I feel so extraordinarily lucky to be working in travel, because I think travel is the ultimate example of this. Travel is this place where I think it is the perfect place to showcase what is possible in AI. Travel is an area that is extraordinarily complex for folks to plan, and it's also very high stakes. So it's high stakes emotionally, it's high stakes financially, and we find that when people do plan travel, it takes an extraordinary amount of time. Now, some of that is really fun time, like watching videos and getting inspired, and some of it is not. Some of it is real drudgery, trying to find the right price and trying to find the right things to do. And this is a place, not only is there a lot of investment, but expectations have grown over time. So in a variety of ways, people expect more and more from their travel, whether post-COVID, what they're really looking for in terms of the meaningful value it brings to their life, or following a given influencer and seeing the amazingly unique things they do and wanting to have your own unique experiences. So in all sorts of ways, travel takes a lot of effort. And we believe that travel planning can be easier and more fun and more efficient and just like more natural. And Google AI, back to the Google side, is enabling evolution of search in two key ways that really then feed into travel. One is we are evolving in how people can ask questions, and the second is we're evolving in the way that we provide results. So let's see how that kind of adds up. We'll talk through some examples. So in terms of input, travel in many ways is just not, search in many ways is not the search of 20 years ago. Search 20 years ago was only text-based, and text remains very plentiful as a way that people input questions. And in fact, when people do input text questions, the majority of those when it comes to travel are undecided research questions. So there's the more kind of broad, open-ended user needs where they're at the beginning of their journey and exploratory. But beyond that, we also have new types of input. So one of these examples is voice. So I don't know how many of you use voice. How many folks use voice for input with Google? Okay, so I see some hands in the air. I use it all the time. I never used to believe in it, and then I started using voice search, and now I use it pretty much daily. And what we find with voice input is that the types of questions people ask are actually longer and more complex. So we get much more nuanced, sometimes meandering queries that come in, but also, again, much more complex. And beyond that, we've also started to introduce more and more visual ways to search. So whether it's circle to search, or lens, where you take a photo and you search with it, or video input, there are all sorts of ways that people are starting to search visually. So for example, the other day I was walking down the street with my son, we saw a caterpillar, and I thought the caterpillar was this crazy looking thing that was kind of invasive. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but it looked like an invasive caterpillar. I took a picture of it with Google, I asked what it was, and it turns out that it's this special caterpillar that only lives on beech trees. And I looked up and there was a beech tree above us. So it was like this really amazing experience that I never would have been able to articulate as a text query, and yet there I was, my curiosity expanded and then sated with Google. So because of all of this, what we see is that more than 15% of queries each day we've never seen before. This stat every time I see this, this blows my mind. Like, they have never been entered before in Google. So again, really expansive user needs. And our results are evolving. We're evolving in how we reach our users. So throughout our journey, people come to us from Discover, from Google Search. They're using YouTube for travel discovery. They're using maps when they're traveling and before they travel. And we've been expanding what we offer to users. So beyond flights and hotels, we've been expanding into attractions and events and activities and restaurants and car rentals, all in very deep partnership with the global travel ecosystem, because really what we're trying to do is connect people to the businesses that really kind of enable them to have the experiences they want. So here's where it gets fun. I'm going to talk about how our results are evolving, and I'm going to dig into some ways that my team has been using AI to really deliver an AI-forward planning experience with a real-life use case. Okay, so in my town, for whatever reason, November has all these days off. So because of both holidays and parent-teacher conferences, my kids have an inordinate amount of school days that are canceled. And so they end up calling it No School November, which drives me crazy every November because I want them to be in school. But this year, I'm deciding to take advantage of that. So they have a long weekend, and I have a lot of miles stored up from all the work travel I've been doing. And I want to go somewhere. I live in Boston, so I want to travel somewhere. I want it to be warmer than Boston, but not international. And so I asked Google, I have this curiosity, where should I travel in November in the States? And I get an AI overview of a list of ideas generated from sites and from online forums across the web. And in this list, there are corroborating web links. So I can dig into any of these examples and see why people recommend Palm Springs or why they recommend San Diego. So after doing a bit of research here, I decide I want to go to San Diego. I haven't been in decades, and my kids have never been, and they have a great zoo, so it seems fun. So I start trying to figure out, okay, what would I actually do there? So then I asked Google to plan me a 3-day trip to San Diego with kids. And what it does is it starts bringing together for me a sample itinerary with daily activities and meal ideas, with flights and hotels, really so I can get a sense of what would this trip entail. It is customized to my query. It has factual data, and again, links that people can go into to understand more, whether it's opening hours or images or reviews and what people say about this place. And we take into account feasibility, so we won't offer you, say, going to a museum on a Monday when it's closed. And then finally, again, for me, Google's recommendations are okay, but I really want to dig in and look at the actual links, read the person's blog post that's talking about San Diego, or look at that site, that has the top 10 places that other people recommend in San Diego. So I can also take this as a jumping off point into my exploration. As I'm looking at this, I see an option to go to Legoland, but I'm not so interested in Legoland. My kids are a little bit old for that. And also, it's San Diego, and I want to do San Diego, not Legoland. So I actually swapped that out for a local park that we can go on a hike in, and I get a different idea, and again, I can kind of iterate from there. I also get a sense of flight and hotel costs, so I can look at flight and hotel costs. If I'm ready to book, I can then go into that experience and explore more. And then finally, I view this as really a starter set of ideas. I don't believe that Google in like a single query is going to plan me the perfect trip. But I do want to save it, because there are lots of really good ideas in here. So I can export this into Google Docs. And we know that a lot of people do their planning in either Google Docs or Google Sheets. So I can export it there, and I can come back to it later. Part of our measure of success here that we're really looking for, obviously it's user happiness, it's also real partner success. So for us at Google, one of the things that I think about a lot and that our team thinks about very heavily is, are we connecting people with the partners that can actually enable their travel experience to be amazing? So are we connecting people to the places they can book the museum tickets, or to the folks who can help them book that hotel, or the tour agency that's going to give them an amazing bike tour of San Diego. And one of the things that we're excited about is that with Trip Ideas and with many of these tools, we think that we're sending essentially much more highly qualified clicks to those partners, people with much higher intent because they have higher confidence in what they're clicking on. Okay, back to me and my trip. Before I travel, one of the things that I really like to do is get excited about where I'm going. And the way that I do that is watching videos. So I go to YouTube and I start watching YouTube videos on things to do in San Diego. I see something that I really like, so I use Circle to search in Google. It looks at what that is. It figures out it is the Maritime Museum. I decide that I want to go there, and so I book tickets. I'm able to book tickets from a multitude of different partners, kind of choose who I want to book with. Again, this is something that just was not possible before the major leaps in AI that we have, as an industry, recently made. As the trip gets closer, I realize that I haven't actually booked hotel rooms yet. I'm always pretty late on this. So I'm not super choosy about my hotels, but I do want a hotel with both a pool and adjoining rooms. So I can enter in that complex request, and I can find great hotels at the right price, and then book it. Okay, so then we finally get there. We're in San Diego. Again, I really wanted to go to the zoo. Can't wait to get started. So we get in the car the first morning, and my son asks me if the zoo has pandas. And I have no idea if the zoo has pandas, but now I can actually ask Maps. So I can go into Maps and I can say, hey, does the zoo have pandas? And it says, yes, it does. So we're all very excited. And again, this is an example of something we just weren't able to do before. I can ask questions like, is there free parking? Can I rent strollers? Does it have tigers? Does it have pandas? And I can get answers to those without digging really deeply into a web page. I have spent a lot of time digging into web pages for restaurants to see if they have outdoor seating that's pet friendly. So now I can answer those questions more quickly. Okay, later in the day, we're at the zoo. My husband asks whether or not we have dinner plans. We don't. I haven't figured that out yet. But I have been trying to get my family to eat less meat, so I decided to start by actually searching for vegetarian restaurants. And I searched for vegetarian restaurants, and instead of just getting a list of vegetarian restaurants, I get categorized sets of vegetarian restaurants that are determined by essentially whatever the local categories of those are. And I see that there's a cluster of vegetarian Mexican. My family loves Mexican food, so yes, that's a win. And I find a restaurant that looks good, and I book it, make a reservation for the evening. And at the end of it all, I feel like a star. You know, like I've planned an amazing trip for my family. They've had a wonderful time. We have a lot of great pictures. We've had a lot of unique experiences, and we have some great stories to share. So like trip, success. Thank you, No School November. So then part of the question here also becomes, you know, what is success for our partners? Again, we are a connector. At Google, like our goal really is to connect people with those experiences. And when I think about this, I think that if we make it easier for people to plan travel and to book travel, they will plan and book more travel. And they will do that more regularly. So be able to do a couple more weekend trips, have a few more adventures. If we can lower that burden of entry, then it makes it easier for people to actually partake. And by inspiring these trips and by connecting them to unique experiences, then we can, like I mentioned before, really kind of drive more highly qualified, more confident folks into the travel ecosystem to make decisions and to make purchases and to actually have those extraordinary experiences they wouldn't have otherwise. So, you know, my maybe question for everyone here is really this question of how will you meet this moment of innovation? You know, like where can we as an industry exceed customer expectations and really change the way that travel planning works? And I think that there is so much opportunity. And I'll say again that I think we're all extraordinarily lucky to be in travel at this moment of AI innovation. And so hopefully you are as excited as I am about that. Thanks.
Very well done. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Phocuswright conference. First timer.
Yeah.
We need to get you a badge with a little black dot so everyone can identify that you're
totally.
a first timer.
I would totally wear it. Yes.
So that was a great presentation. I think it was really fascinating to see how it feels like you mentioned Larry Page at the beginning, and as Google search has evolved, you've almost been, obviously Google search is, and we see it across our research, it's always right at the top. A lot of people think they're booking on Google. We ask about booking sources, and Google typically comes up fairly high. Is this the moment you've been waiting for at Google search as you're thinking about now, you can do amazing things?
Well, I mean, I will say that I think it's an extraordinarily exciting moment for our industry overall. There are so many ways that I think about search evolving. We're in this moment of evolution where we're moving from questions to conversations. From people essentially having to translate into Google speak a question into a few succinct keywords that maybe gets the results that they want, into something that's much more natural language, much more dialogue forward. And like I said, it's this time where you can bring in multimodal input. You can bring in images and you can bring in videos, and we can output images and videos too. We can find the best videos to show you and bring them to you, and really create a much more inspirational experience that's not just link and text forward. And I think it's this really interesting moment where personalization can also play a major role. I mean, I was watching some of the other folks presenting up here, and the amount that personalization can really change the travel space, I think, is incredibly exciting. So in that way, yeah, I mean, I think search is, overall, if I can speak for search, maybe I will say I am really excited about this moment and what we can do. And I think the biggest, thing that we also think a lot about is really like bold and responsible innovation. So doing that in a way that, and we can talk about this more, but that's really responsible for our users and our partners.
Yeah. You mentioned voice as something that is, is used by you on a daily basis. And
yeah.
I know lots of others in this audience that are doing a lot of experimentation with generative AI, voice response, translation. It's totally incredible how far translation's come in the last 6 months.
Yes.
I agree with you that, I'm starting to use voice more and more and more, and you can capture a lot more intent because it's more of a conversation. So, how does that impact as we're thinking maybe out into the future? Are we going to get more adoption of voice, and is that where you see things potentially going?
Well, I mean, I think voice input, image input, video input, and the kind of intermingling between those and text input, I expect all of those to grow, kind of the pie chart to change, if you will. And part of the evolution that I don't know about, part of what we're trying to experiment with, is when do people want each of those? It is this moment of innovation, but I would say that industry-wide, nobody has product market fit yet. There's some really interesting kind of pieces out there, and for example, like voice, I think is extraordinarily useful as an input mechanism to search, but has it changed the way that people do travel search yet? No. And so like, what would that look like? I think it's a exciting open question.
Yeah. We're going to extend the time for another few minutes, so they can chime me as much as they want, but we will have some time to chat. So you lead a team of 700 engineers across, 7 or 8 markets?
Yep.
How much more efficient are your engineers today?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. There are all sorts of ways that we are using Gen AI to try and accelerate our workflows. So we're absolutely using it to accelerate our coding, and we are using it to accelerate things like how do we actually do experimentation? How do we understand the metrics that come out of the experiments that we run and interpret those effectively? We also use it for all sorts of other productivity tools internally, like email drafting and presentation drafting. So in all sorts of ways, we are starting to use Gen AI to accelerate our business. And I have set goals around acceleration for my team, although they're very difficult to measure.
Yeah, it's true. We're still in a test and learn phase, right?
Yeah.
So you're learning as you go, and it's interesting, thinking about trust, and trust is something that Google has built, its reputation around, that you're providing the most trustworthy results to the consumer.
Yeah.
Trust is an issue in the early days of Gen AI. So how do you kind of balance those things as you're, you're testing and learning, and you're testing, new results pages? Like, how do you think about that to maintain that trust with your?
Yeah, no, it is like absolutely the most critical question. So I'm glad you asked it. I think I said this earlier, but Google really thinks about our AI, our push AI, as trying to be both bold and responsible. So really trying to push the frontier, but in a very responsible way. And when it comes to Gen AI, there are risks around hallucination, and really what we show to our users, and making sure that that is actually accurate. So we do a bunch of things there. One of the things that we do is we label all of the Gen AI results that we show, so that way people understand that they are getting a generated result. That only goes so far. So we also do a huge amount of work on factuality and grounding. So actually testing ourselves and evaluating our results of, are they factual, and do we have highly trustworthy sources that we are sourcing that information from. We're constantly measuring that and improving that through feedback mechanisms, both from users and our own internal testing. For the Gen AI results that we show, we, whenever possible, link to other sites, so that way people can actually follow those and gain confidence and trust based on the actual source material, and also just gain depth, connect to the sites themselves. And then finally, I mean, like you said, it's constantly evolving. So we're constantly evolving our measurement and making sure that we are learning and getting better. And we have had our own missteps, but from each of them we've learned and we've improved our internal systems.
Great. So I want to get into some practical recommendations that you have for this group. So they're trying to figure out how to stay relevant on Google, as search evolves, AI evolves. What are some of the key recommendations that you provide? You work with lots of these companies. What are some of those recommendations?
Yeah, well, a few things. First of all, people are really looking for meaningful connections to human voices. So I think in some ways the time of generic listicles is maybe I won't say at an end, but no longer the place to start. This question of how do we work with influencers, how do we work with people who have kind of pointed opinions and also a personality, that is something that Gen AI won't bring. So how do you bring that to the forefront? How do you actually make those organic connections is definitely really relevant in there. I think additionally, one of the things, and I mentioned this earlier as well, but this is a real moment of innovation. And so leaning in and just experimenting with user interface, experimenting with customer service, experimenting with, again, organic connections. We all have a lot to learn. And so that would be another recommendation. And then I guess the third thing that I would say, and this is maybe less about Google search, but just overall, I do think that the iceberg under the water, that part of Gen AI is the productivity side of it. So if you all aren't yet using Gen AI tools, these large language models, to think about how you rethink developer workflow, if you have developers, how you rethink your service, the service side of your industry, how you rethink even like your customer outreach and your internal workflows. These are all things that 5 years from now, they will absolutely be different. And I think if we aren't innovating there, this is definitely how we think about it at Google, we'll be left behind. So I guess that would be the third recommendation, less around search.
Great. So I want to finish with a game of this or that. So I'm going to give you a couple of phrases, and you choose which one suits you best.
All right, let's go.
I think I know the answer to this one based on our conversation before we got on stage. Sun or snow?
Oh, definitely snow. I like outdoor adventures.
Europe or Asia?
Ooh, well, my husband is European, so I think I have to go with Europe, but I will say I like Asian food better.
This one, there's a few more choices. The education industry, social media, healthcare, or travel.
Oh, definitely travel. Oh my God, no question. That could be a 2-hour drink session.
Hiking or museums?
Hiking, outdoor sports.
ChatGPT or Gemini?
Gemini, come on.
Expedia or Booking? I won't make
They're both amazing. I love them both.
Thank you very much, Julie Farago.